Hey everybody, it's Miss Gelly coming to you on Wednesday. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching this video today. We're going to be talking about migration. And so this is a video that's going to introduce you to the reasons why people migrate. We're going to classify different reasons. Keep in mind there is an assignment that goes along with this. So after you watch this video, make sure that you are completing that assignment for today. So what is migration? Here's a definition: the permanent or semi-permanent relocation of people from one place to another. So you've probably heard the term immigrant before. Immigration or an immigrant, any movement into a location. Think about the I in immigrate is into. Get rid of myself. Emigration is the movement away or exiting from a location. So notice that E. Emigration, exiting. Why do people migrate? There are always a combination of push and pull factors that force people or encourage people to move. Push factors are negative. They're negative circumstances, events, or conditions that cause people to move away. Pull factors are positive conditions and circumstances of that particular location that's pulling people to that place. Both push and pull factors can be ESPN. Now, we have not talked about ESPN yet in this class. ESPN is an acronym that we will use often in this class to think about various factors that or lenses, if you will, that we can analyze a situation from. The E stands for economic, so anything to do with money. The S stands for social. These could be social or demographic or cultural reasons. P stands for political, anything that has to do with government. And the N stands for natural or environmental. So when we think about migration, we're going to focus on two types: international and internal. When you think about migration, my guess is that what first comes to mind might be international. So like, who is immigrated to a particular country, or maybe when did your family immigrate, or maybe you have a friend whose family is a recent immigrant. But another type of migration is internal movement. Internal just means within a region. So we're going to talk about all of these types throughout this unit, but I just want to introduce you to this graphic first that's going to show that there's international and internal migration. So back to the ESPN. Economic push and pull factors. Here's some examples. Remember, this is anything to do with money. So a push factor might be a job loss, or there are fewer employment opportunities for people in that particular location, maybe low wages, and those are things that are going to discourage people from living there. What might pull a person to a new location would be any sort of job opportunities, higher wages, maybe it's seasonal work, seasonal jobs. So here's a case study example. In the 1970s, factory workers in the Rust Belt. So the Rust Belt is where manufacturing used to be very important in the industrial age. Even the early parts of the 20th century, when automobile industry was getting way. What happened in the 70s is that unemployment started to rise among factory workers. So Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio is another classic example. The jobs were no longer there. These factories, for a variety of reasons, but usually economic benefits in other places, were moving to southern states, or in many cases, they were moved abroad as well. Well, the workers followed those jobs, and many factory workers moved to southern states like Kentucky and Tennessee, where those jobs were available to them. All right, here's a social or a demographic example. So push factors in this category would be anything related to discrimination, prejudice, persecution, racism, and it's anything that has to do with somebody's identity. Gender, ethnicity, religion, or belief systems is common. Could be traditional gender roles. Men typically are going to move more often as migrants than women, although women tend to migrate, just not quite as far. That's what we see as a typical pattern. Pull factor in this category might be more freedoms. Well, that makes sense. It's the opposite of discrimination and prejudice. Anywhere there's more freedoms and opportunities to be who you are is going to be a pull factor. And it might be, some sort of your family's there, or you have some sort of friend who's there that's going to be enticing for people. Common sense sort of stuff. Example, Mormon migration. This is mid 1800s. Mormonism is a subsect of Christianity, by the way. So people of the Mormon faith, the leader was Joseph Smith. He was killed, and a lot of violence resulted in lots of deaths. And this was a push factor for 70,000 Mormons. And the pull factors were isolation and agricultural opportunities in the Salt Lake area, so Great Salt Lake area of Utah. And still today, we see a heavy percentage of Mormons living in that Great Salt Lake area. Political example, anything related to war is a push factor. Any sort of repressive laws, discrimination, anything that's going to be government or could be like a terrorist organization, is preventing you from feeling safe. That's a push factor. Pull factors would, of course, be peace, or here's a good vocabulary word to know, asylum. So political migrants who move due to fear of oppression and may be in danger because of their political views can be granted asylum. Asylum's a fancy word for protection in accepting countries. So you may have heard of the word refugee. A refugee is somebody who has legally gone through this process of being granted asylum or protection. And so they've kind of gained status in a new country as a new citizen. We'll talk more about that in another day. Here's an example study. Anti-communists from Cuba. So once Fidel Castro took over Cuba in the late 1950s, anti-communists, remember Fidel Castro was a communist, were jailed or killed for speaking out against this government. And so many anti-communists fled to the United States. The United States granted them asylum, the free democracy state. And still today we see a heavy number of Cuban descendants living in the Miami, Florida area. Oops, and I have a typo on Florida. Just seeing. And still today, this is an interesting kind of connection that Miami-Dade County, where we saw a lot of Cuban descendants live, actually went for Donald Trump in this previous election. And Latinx community typically has voted for the Democratic candidate pretty overwhelmingly. But this is an interesting juxtaposition because the Democrats are viewed as more of a socialist, more of a communist, maybe even threat. And so it's an interesting kind of connection with where we're seeing Cuban descendants vote in today's political elections and what their history is and why they would potentially vote that way. All right, natural or environmental push and pull factors. Of course, natural disasters, drought, crop failure, intense climate. Climate change is becoming a big push factor. We'll look at some examples of that from around the world. Pull factors would be desirable climate or landscape, anything that's pulling people to environments that are easier to live in. Of course, classic example, Hurricane Katrina. More than 1 million people were displaced due to Hurricane Katrina. That is like the size of Minneapolis and St. Paul combined, just so you kind of get a frame of reference for how many people that is. So it was a pretty big deal. All right, so that is what wraps up our video today. Remember, go ahead and do that assignment that's associated with this topic of causes of migration, and we'll see you next time.